Okay, well, thank you very much, Lawrence, for that introduction. Highly appreciated, and thank you very much for the opportunity to come and speak here this evening. I'm absolutely delighted to talk about my favourite subject, which is mining, of course. I'm a mining industry tragic, a supply side tragic, if you like, having been in it for a very long time, 40 years or thereabouts. We were recounting some of that, having joined Rio Tinto, or CRA as it was known in those days, back in the early 70s or thereabouts. So tonight I'm going to go through a few slides here which are sort of uploaded and available. There's only about 25 of them or thereabouts, so 5 minutes each, 75, 125 minutes, 2 hours, so just take your time. Have a drink, sit back and relax. And if there's anybody sort of still standing, still interested, still in the room, at that point, Lawrence, happy to take a few questions. And the good news is that I've got one or two of our people from Tigers here tonight, Tony Manini and Craig Parry and young James DeQuipney. So if there's any difficult questions on that supply side, Lawrence, they can chip in. So really to talk about the Asia mining, I know it was billed as China and so on, and that's okay. We can talk about that all night, and I see you've had some wonderful speakers recently on China. So thought we'd talk about mining in Asia, what we describe as Asia and Australia's virtuous circle of economic growth, from demand all the way through to supply. Talk about the Asian region as, generally speaking, mining friendly, what we see, what we in the mining industry see as the key success factors for investing in this part of the world, and finally some, I suppose, a few examples of success in mining in that part of the world. So that's where we're going. In terms of the what we call the virtuous circle of economic growth and prosperity, and Australia's right in the middle of it. So it's Asia and Australia's virtuous circle there, starting with demand, and you know, we as far as we're concerned, we're in for multi-decade demand growth in this part of the world, led very much by China. Great prospectivity, and in fact unsung prospectivity for most minerals in this part of the world, not only Australia but the balance of Asia, and very much underexplored at this time, we believe. There's a great map actually of the northern part of Central Asia and the northern part of Asia over here, where Tony and the rest of us have some good prospects there. The people side of it, well, you know, we have the people. We've certainly got terrific technical and technological capability here in Australia, all the way from exploration through, and now that is starting to permeate throughout Asia, and our influence in that part of the world is going to continue and blossom, is already very important to that part of the world, and will continue. We have the technology, the technical capability, and I can tell you that there's a revolution going on in mining in Australia, in technology and technical capability there in our industry. The capital is becoming increasingly available in this part of the world as we grow the surplus, not only in China but other parts of Asia. So we may no longer have to rely on pounding the pavement of New York and London to access that capital. It'll be more Hong Kong, Singapore and Shanghai and Jakarta. And of course that leads us through to supply. So all of those factors bringing forward the supply side over the period. So we here, Lawrence, are absolutely blessed here in Australia, and lucky again to be part of this virtuous circle, absolutely pivotal to this strong growth of demand through the supply over the next multiple decades. Okay, so the demand side, we see the world going to continue in a long period of economic expansion, multi-decade economic growth, led by China, followed by India, with most other developing countries of Asia and the rest of the world all chipping in from the edge of the green over the next 20 or 30 years. No question about it. In China you have unbridled, unstoppable economic growth on a scale we've never ever seen before. and we will be able to sit back and look back in 20 years' time, or 2020, those of us who are still vertical and able to do that with shock, awe and wonder at what has been achieved over these decades. Absolutely remarkable, and we've already seen quite a bit of it already. China, the major driver, and as we say, the growth formula here, they've passed the point of economic takeoff, a growing consumption from the growing middle class, metal-intensive stage of economic growth. The number of cans per man per day per house type of thing for metal intensity stage. The largest urban migration in the history of the world, and we're seeing that on a continuing basis. Massive infrastructure development, inspired and of course funded by the Chinese government, will continue, and what we politely call here the social imperative, which is the political imperative, really, to ensure that they keep all of that going to remain in power. So you've got all of that happening. And it's happening in other parts of developing Asia, and indeed in other parts of the world as well. So strong demand factors, and a couple of things here. This again is really increasing private wealth, increasing private consumption, personal consumption going to take place in China. You can see the gold. Don't worry too much about the detail here, but this is the gold saving or gold consumption in China. Is now the biggest consumer of gold in the world. Between China and India, they consume about 40% of the world's gold, and increasing at a tremendous rate, actually. Chinese, like most other people in the world, love gold in particular. Copper intensity of use here. I mean, a lot of the private consumption goods or consumer goods contain, well, most investor goods, capital goods and consumer goods contain copper one way or the other. So there's still a long way for China to go in terms of the metal intensity of use of copper. So you'll continue to see copper go up, our favourite commodities, by the way, in the mighty tiger. That is copper and gold. And in terms of GDP, the increase in private consumption expenditure. Again, you probably can't see all of this here, but these are other Asian nations, and this is China in terms of percentage of private expenditure as a share of GDP. China is simply lagging because it hasn't been at that stage of economic growth, and this will pick up. So that's why you're going to continue to see private consumption drive economic growth in China, and then of course you're going to see it in other parts of developing Asia. Okay, so that's the demand side. In terms of prospectivity in this part of the world, as we say, it's very highly prospective, and it's very and underexplored, certainly for the metals and minerals that we're interested in. This is a map of the Asian region. It's a little bit incomplete. It's copper and copper gold. The gold is the gold dominant type deposits. The green is the copper dominant type deposits, and the blue is the copper and molybdenum type deposits, or regions of prospectivity as opposed to deposits where we believe the deposits will actually be. So you've got the great regions of Australia here in terms of Kalgoorlie, Victoria, Prominent Hill, and South Australia here, IOCG country as they say, and up in the northeastern ranges. You've got the fabulous prospectivity of PFEG, PNG, all the way through to Myanmar here, which is island Southeast Asia. And some of these deposits you will all know very well: Bougainville, Misima, Lahire, Porgera, Ok-Tedi, Grasberg, Freeburg, Ertsberg, up here into the Philippines. Actually lots of copper gold moly or copper gold deposits here in the Philippines. Tampakan, one of the world's biggest. Gosawong, a gold ore body being mined here in Indonesia by Newcrest. You've got Kalian, an ex-Rio Tinto gold mine in Kalimantan. Batu Hijau down here to the east of Java, and then a new discovery there right at the eastern end of Java called Tujuh Bukit, and all the way up here to Matabi, which is a gold mine that we in G Resources, one of the companies that I'm involved in Hong Kong, we've just spent only $700 million bringing that into production, and we produced our first gold bar there gladly after taking twice as long and costing us twice as much on the 24th of July this year. And amazingly, or not so amazingly, this ore body, this particular project was discovered by geologists from Normandy, Anglo-Asia, and headed, as you know, by the very famous and great achiever Robert Champion de Crespigny, whose son is here today, James de Crespigny. So Robert was very much involved in the discovery and the joint venture that led to that discovery there. And I should say, just a quick word here on other famous, I mean there's lots and lots of famous Australian explorers here, but I should say at the end of this particular chain of ore bodies here, the Bougainville, of course, is well known to many people out here. It wasn't so much discovered by Sir Frank Espy, but Sir Frank was in charge of Bougainville Copper. He was the chairman, the CEO, then the chairman of Bougainville Copper, and of course went on to be vice chairman of CRA and a director of Rio Tinto, and just a fabulous achiever in our industry. He was very much involved in Bougainville and the development of that, and Bougainville at the time of its development, Lawrence, in the late 60s, early 70s, was a remarkable achievement, mainly by Australian and American and obviously P&G people, but American engineering, I suppose, but the Aussies were doing most of the brain work. Lowish grade type ore body, or was seen as a lowish grade type copper gold ore body at that time. So high risk profile about it, and particularly going offshore into this tough country up here. No question about that, from a topographical, geotechnical, geological and sort of weather perspective, if you like, in this part of the world, and it was just a wonderful achievement. As Sir Val Duncan, somebody mentioned Sir Val here this evening, Sir Val described it as the jewel in the crown of Rio Tinto at one point. So Frank was very heavily involved here, and over the other end, almost to the other end of the scale here in Myanmar. I was up here just recently, and in Myanmar there's a mine there called the Bordwin mine, which was opened in about 1920 or something like that. And the opening, I think, mining engineer was another Espy, another Frank Espy. That was Sir Frank Espy's father. He completed his mining engineering degree in 1914 or thereabouts, and I think his first job was a mining engineer up here in the Bordwin mine, and he stayed there for no less than 25 years or thereabouts, and ultimately chased out during WW2. Chased out from here through to India, actually a journey of no less than 600 miles on footback, and then ultimately repatriated back to Australia, where he joined Western Mining actually. So you've got some Espys here. My very good friend Paul Espy, who was the chairman of Oxiana for 10 years or several years anyway. The Espy family well and truly embedded into the history of this part of the world. Okay, so you then go into the mainland Southeast Asia gold belts, and we're very familiar with the Thailand copper gold belt, Thailand, Laos, southern China, Yunnan, Sichuan province here, and Tony Manini has spent quite a bit of time up in here. The gold and copper gold ore bodies of eastern China. Then you're into Mongolia, and a fabulous discovery up there recently being constructed now, called Oyu Tolgoi, now under the control of Rio Tinto. Further out, of course, into other parts of Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, which hosts one of the biggest gold operations on the planet at Murantown. And then, of course, over into the northern part of China, there are more copper moly belts, and then all the way up into Kamchatka and far eastern Russia. which used to be called Siberia, but is now no longer called Siberia. We call it, we've eliminated that from our terminology, and it's Chukotka is the easternmost province here of Russia. And then of course you go across the Bering Strait and down into the British Columbian copper gold belt, and then of course you're down into South America and the fabulous ore bodies in the Andes there in South America. I should say we are up here in Russia. We have a coal deposit, so not linked to the copper gold systems here, but we have a coking coal deposit right out here in Chukotka in eastern Russia. So lots and lots of prospectivity, but it just has not received anywhere near the attention it deserves in terms of the exploration. So the exploration side has got to catch up, and that's what we're doing in the mighty high-flying tigers. We need to do more of it in that part of the world. And this little chart here is simply to say that the prospectivity is fabulous, but the amount of the world's exploration dollars, the world's exploration budget, the billions of dollars that goes into exploration each year, a lot of it goes into gold, by the way. Almost half of the world's exploration budget in the metal side, metalliferous side, goes into gold, would you believe? The good thing about gold is it's so hard to find, so when you've got it, never let it go. And Pacific Southeast Asia is right at the bottom end of that scale. We think it's actually increasing, but it's right at the bottom end of the scale, and that, to us, of course, is an absolutely fabulous opportunity, not only for the mighty high-flying tigers, but also for other Australian companies. So looking forward to filling that gap. Okay, on the people side, really not much to say here. I mean, one thing that we do very well here in Australia is the training and educating, training and developing people in our industry, as you would expect, but also a bit of an increasing focus on what has become known as retaining, attracting, leveraging Asia-capable talent, and people from Asia Link and the wonderful work that's going on in the universities around Australia in attracting more and more Asian students to our shores, but particularly educating Australia to be, as they say, Asia capable. I mean, it's not new, but we're just going to have to do lots more of it, Lawrence, over a period of time. So then, this is a chart here of the college graduates from China, manual labour levels, and so on. So the labour is certainly available. Yes, there is a skill shortage, but that's the gap, and yet another gap that we have to fill. Okay, so in terms of the technology, and as I say, we here in Australia, it's no surprise to you to learn that we are best in show, best in class, best in world. The Canadians would probably object to that, but as far as we're concerned, from exploration, from grassroots exploration technology, all the way through to development, all the way through to environmental management and community relations and sustainability of your operation, we have all of that capability here in Australia, and using it worldwide. There's not too many places in the world that you can go and you can't find an Australian geologist or mining engineer. We'd like to get them back here, actually, more here, and particularly in the Asian area. So we take it all the way through. You're very familiar with the long history, experience, and culture that we have in mining, and I tend to use this type of chart when I'm talking to people in Indonesia and various other places to ensure that we in Australia, the AusIMM and so on, it's pointed out to people that we do have this tremendous capability here. All of the big companies are here, obviously, in Australia, big and small. Now, there's certainly a revolution going on, as far as I'm concerned, in technical advances, particularly in the exploration side. Australia is short ore bodies, there's no question about that. It's one thing to have billions and billions of tons of iron ore, hematite and magnetite and so on. That'll last the world several thousand years, no doubt about that. Some of the coal deposits may be a bit less, but in terms of the gold, copper, various other metals. We're short ore bodies there, so they'll be there. There's no question about it. The belts of prospectivity are here, but they'll be harder to find, they'll be more expensive to find, and they'll be undercover. And there's a terrific amount of work going on, not only within the industry, but within government support through Geoscience Australia, best, absolute top of the class in terms of worldwide Geoscience Australia, doing terrific work in exploration. In the operations themselves, in terms of automation, driverless trucks, driverless trains, in terms of remote sensing, in other words, control centres in Fortescue, the control centre for the mining at the Solomon mine in the Pilbara will be in Perth. The control centre for our whole train system is in Perth, so saving that almost all of that fly-in, fly-out type work. So a terrific amount of work going on in that, and in energy efficiency. And as Lawrence mentioned there, I'm involved with a wonderful group of people attacking energy efficiency from the end it needs to be attacked from, and that's being very conscious of energy usage, of energy pricing, and working very hard at ensuring that we reduce the urge required in comminution, which is crushing, grinding, bumping, and so on. In other words, ore dressing, if you like. The biggest energy consumer in our industry is the breaking and the crushing and the grinding of ores and minerals, and we're attacking it, as I say, at the right end. So terrific amount of work going on here, and you will see, effectively see, we're fighting back in terms of the cost increases on the labour shortages and safety issues and so on, and we're going more and more for this for automation. Okay, so that's on the technology side. In terms of the regional capital availability, I mentioned that, just 2 or 3 things here. Hong Kong is now the IPO capital of the world, effectively. A little bit down in the last 6 months or so, but for the last 2 or 3 years, effectively been the IPO capital of the world, surpassing London and New York and Toronto. In terms of the M&A deals, its share of global M&A, now Asia is now leading the world in terms of asset management there, and particularly in terms of strong stock exchange performance. The Asian stock exchanges outpacing the Western world stock exchanges. So you've got growing capital capability, you've got growing sophistication of that financial capability in this part of the world, and growing access to funds. The surplus that's being created every day in China and the rest of that developing world has to be marshalled and channeled, and again, we're lucky, we're fortunate, we're in the right place, right time in terms of being able to take advantage of that growing capital pool. Okay, so the supply side, and as I said, I'm a supply side tragic here in terms of the industry. We're going to be playing catch-up footy, for the next 10 or 20 years, effectively, as we run to catch up to this very, very strong demand. We need more Fortescues, if you like, more FMGs, more Andrew Forests to go from zero to hero, from 0 tonnes per annum to 155 million tonnes per annum in about 5 years or something or other. Just a remarkable achievement. 3 mines, 1 railway, 1 port with multiple berths there at Port Hedland. I mean, multiple billions of dollars, all spent in a short time frame. I do remember working at Hammersley inside Rio Tinto many years ago, and our pace was just incredible at that time, building those iron ore mines. But this is just sensational, and it's not simply because we at Rio Tinto or BHP were slow. It's simply the demand has called for this supply, and that's what's going to continue
Lawrence, in our view. So running to catch up, we need more of them. We're just perfectly positioned here inside Asia. We've got some structural challenges in terms of infrastructure, regulatory infrastructure, sovereign risk issues here in Australia itself, as well as our nearby Asian region, and the omnipresent, sadly, supply uncertainties of industrial issues and, of course, weather. So you've got those supply uncertainties. We're long-term thinkers, planners and investors. It actually takes a long time for some of these projects to come through. I mean, Andrew Forrest has set the world record here. It could be a universal record, actually, in terms of getting up that sort of capacity. It usually takes other people, mere mortals, longer than that. So, as I say, we will be running to play catch-up footy there on the supply side. So lots of work to be done. Okay, so I'll just keep shouting at everybody here, Lawrence, for a few more minutes on what do we look for when we're entering a new domain. We thought people might be a bit interested in that. In other words, how we go about evaluating going into, whether it's Myanmar or PNG for that matter, or Laos, where we've spent quite a lot of time, or other parts of the world. I'll just skip through that one, but go to the what we call the key success factors, the KSFs. You would have heard about all of that. In terms of what they are, you've got to go through the evaluation of where is it, what is it, who is it, most importantly, and how do you actually get on with the development to keep it all nice and simple. Okay, so what we call the enabling macro factors here, in terms of the where is it, what is the inherent mineral prospectivity. As I say, most of this part of the world has high prospectivity. What's the geological endowment, or what do we know of it? What's the history, and what mines and operations are here, all the way from Australia, where we have terrific knowledge, background, experience and so on, through to places like Laos, where there's really very little mining, Cambodia much the same, Vietnam much the same, all the way up into southern Yunnan province, southern China, and Myanmar. You know, you just don't have that knowledge, and one of the things that we actually can do, or the Australian government, Geoscience Australia, apart from the private people doing it, but the Aussie government is actually doing its bit in that part of the world in terms of funding, as part of the AusIMM program, funding geophysical surveys type of thing. So that's a very good thing. So you've got to look at all of that in terms of sovereign risk evaluation, security and stability. That's all that matters as far as we're concerned. It's got to be stable, it's got to be secure, you've got to be able to have your people there, but you've also got to have that stable economic outlook. Country hardware, what's the geography, what's the topo, what's the rainfall and so on, what is the infrastructure, and what is the available labour force, all the way from China, for example, where we don't, and Indonesia for that matter, where we have quite a bit of experience. You really got mining capability there, more or less. You need to have some heavy lift technical people there, of course, through to Laos, where in Laos, where we built the copper and gold mine, Tony, I think we had no less than 300 Aussie expats working up there, at one particular point in time, fly in, fly out type of thing, deep in the Ho Chi Minh Trail, actually, in Laos, and most of them involved with training. So of that number, about half of them were training local people to do all that work. So that's on the labour side, country software, legislative regime, fiscal conditions, very importantly, how are you going to go in terms of community support? Are you going to get it all the way from the centre of South Australia in Kupapiti? What sort of community support are you going to get there, through to Laos and in Peru, various places like this, where it can be a bit tough. I don't think there's any doubt you will always get community support for your programs and for your operation. It's a question of time and exactly how you go about it, and that comes back to the people. Okay, so what is it? And again, you don't need a lecture from me on the difference between iron ore and aluminium. So you've got to be at the big end of town really to be into those things, through to copper and gold, where you can actually be very competitive and very successful and very profitable for your shareholders in the copper and gold side at that smaller end of town. What's the outlook for the industry? And as I say, gold, you can never ever have enough gold. So just watch this space in terms of the gold price. Copper, absolutely the same. Uranium, the same. So the outlook very strong, actually for most minerals, but we have our favourites. Then you've got the micro factors here, Lawrence, in terms of the tonnes grade recovery upside. You would have seen all this. Cost, where does it sit on the cost curve, or likely to sit on the cost curve, and so on. So looking at those, all of those micro factors, nothing much else matters when you're doing your sums and those things there. And what's the technology? Underground mining, open pit mining, how are you going to go in terms of what process do you have to use? What new technology or old technology can you use, and how you're going to go from an environmental management perspective, whether you're in the Atacama Desert, or the Gibber Desert or Gibson Desert in here in Australia, through to North Sumatra, where you only get 4 metres of rainfall per annum, and that's certainly your biggest environmental challenge in that part of the world. Okay, so that's the what is it, and this is the who is it, which is the most important thing at the end of the day. Because good people will always bring you good projects and ultimately successful, which is why I'm associated with people like Craig Parry and Tony Manini and James de Crepney there. So not only the general capability, background and experience, but commitment in terms of commitment to all stakeholders, the teamwork in terms of, and this is something that we practiced very, very seriously in the Mighty Ox, in terms of openness and working together, because there's nothing more powerful, as far as I'm concerned, in running a business, being involved in a business, than people working together as teams. Nothing more powerful. And license to operate there in terms of your government relations, community engagement, and a culture of sustainability. Easy things to say, very difficult things actually in some cases to do, but you must have a strong commitment in terms of those people you have must not only buy off on the culture of the company in which you're involved, but they must buy off on the culture and respect that culture of the communities and the villages and the areas and the domains in which they are working. Absolutely fundamental characteristic to have there. And in terms of, there's a picture actually of Craig. Craig gets into the picture over here in terms of their continuous improvement and growth orientation. So that's what you've got to have, people who are continually jumping out of the ground, looking to get on and grow the business. So that's the most important thing. How it's done. This is one of the things, again, nothing to bore everybody witless here, Lawrence, with this, but in terms of the how, one of the things that the people often say is, well, you boys in the iron ore business, you just go over to the west and you find some rusty coloured rocks and you dig them all up and you ship them out to Japan or Korea or China. It's as simple as that. Well, unfortunately, it's not that simple. It goes all the way back to the exploration side. The detailed technology and the capital and the time and the precision involved in all of these things is enormous. From the discovery days, whether it be the Pilbara, the iron ore in the Pilbara, or the gold in North Sumatra, from discovery to first production. I said the 24th of July was our first gold pour up at Matabi, 24th of July 2012, and the discovery was made in the mid-90s or thereabouts. So you're talking 10 to 15 years between discovery and ultimate production. A case study, again, really just to mention a couple of things. First of all, this is the mine that I mentioned. We only spent $700 million in building up in North Sumatra, all the way from discovery. Australians involved here at every step of the way. and certainly and finally in terms of running the senior management there. Of the top 10 to 15 people we have there, most of those are Australian, so you've got Australian-Indonesian partnership there in the discovery and the work that we do. And I have to say, Lawrence, in all of the places we've been involved in this part of the world, the Aussie government has actually been very helpful. Whether it be the embassies there on the ground, whether it be Austrade, those people on the ground do a really, really good job out there, all the way through to the universities back here that you work with, DFAT in Canberra. So, I mean, the support, the Aussie government or the politicians tend to beat us up every now and again and give us the carbon tax and the MRRT and various other things. But I have to say that they are very, very supportive in the field and becoming more so. You know, I think that's it helps with a bit of lobbying and so on there to be able to point all this stuff out. But at the end of the day, though, the investments in Indonesia or Laos or various parts of the world, including China, I mean, it's just Australian people, it's Australian investments, it's Australian banks, and all of the design and engineering and technical smarts are done in Brisbane or Perth or Melbourne or somewhere. So there's a terrific Australian engagement in all of these things, and you will recognise a lot of these consultants and advisors and so on, household words in our industry anyway, here in Australia. So a wonderful example actually of all the way from discovery through to operation. And, you know, you've got a lot of smaller investors, the retail investors here in Australia, as well as the colonial First States and various others supplying funding, CBA supplying the debt finance. So a very good sort of Aussie-Indonesian partnership there, and more of them. And you know, this is only a small number, I suppose, but ourselves in Indonesia, that's the G Resources there, but the Tigers is up here in Indonesia, Thailand, looking at other parts of this part of the world and the Philippines. And a lot of these people, not only G and the Tigers up here in Chukotka, but Min Metals, now in Laos and various other parts of Asia, CGA in the Philippines, Kingsgate in Thailand, Newcrest in Indonesia, and out here in Fiji, Freeport, Medusa here in the Philippines. So a lot of, you know, there's a lot of Australian, companies doing all of that work, more and more of them, exploring, developing, and all using, the Australian technical and technological capability. So that's the story. So in summing up here, Lawrence, just finally, I suppose my key points here, is he going to get to the point eventually here? And I suppose it's that Asia, China and Asia will continue to drive that multi-decade commodity demand growth. Of course, you're going to have a few pauses from time to time and a few humps and bumps along the way here, but the long-term trajectory and force is perfectly clear. Supply and investment will continue, so great opportunities for us on the supply side. As I say, the mining industry tragics here. There'll be greater capital availability, and the keys to successful mining investment in that part of the world is stable, secure, competitive jurisdictions, and we in Australia have to provide that competitive jurisdiction here to attract the foreign investment that we've always needed for the past 100 and whatever it is number of years, grown basically on foreign investment. So we have to continue to provide that competitive jurisdiction. Quality projects starts with quality people. Never ever compromise on quality when it comes to people. As I say, you've got the best in world, best in show here in Australia, and you must make that everlasting commitment to the communities in which you operate. Because without their support, without their cooperation, at the end of the day, you are nothing. So you won't have your mine, or you won't have your operation if you don't have that support from those communities. So thank you very much.
I love your energy, Owen. That's fantastic. I could continue for another couple of hours on this sort of notions. Questions. I'd like to invite questions from the audience. I'll actually exercise my right and ask the first one. But in asking the question, if I could ask you to give your name and any affiliation, My question is a simple one that yesterday the Federal Resources Minister Martin Ferguson, or Martin Ferguson, as sometimes referred to, said that the mining boom is over, which he was contradicted later in the day by the Finance Minister Penny Wong. I'm not quite sure of the genesis of this comment, other than some of the current issues, as I mentioned in my opening remark, with regards to BHP Billiton's decision on Olympic Dam and so forth. But can Martin Ferguson see something that we can't? Is there something in the Resources Department in Canberra that's informed him of a view of our prospects, our terms of trade, that would give some credence to his perspective, or does your more bullish perspective on the future demand from the countries with which we're trading hold true, do you think?
Yes, well, I saw, and the headline this morning was in the Herald Sun, the mining boom over, or something like that. Well, of course, again, it's really sort of lots and lots of misconceptions about what this mining boom is. Is it a stock market boom? And that's what Kevin and some of his advisors thought a boom was, thought the mining boom was. You've got an investment boom, and you've got price booms, you know. So then you've got people availability and employment booms and so on and so forth. So it's really coming to grips with the terminology, trying to filter out the day-to-day press stuff, try to filter out the aspirations of the politicians, if you like. And look at the long term. As I say to people, I tend to specialise in the long term, because you can't be as wrong that way, as many times that way. You eventually get it right, I think, Lawrence. But look, I mean, we work in this part of the world, every day. I was there in China with the FMG team, for lots of time, meetings at various levels. I mean, there is no doubt the anecdotal and the analytical evidence is perfectly clear. There's that is absolutely going to continue. It is unstoppable, inevitable, long-term economic growth. And as I say, it's going to have the humps and bumps. It may change its shape from 10.5% to 7.5%, but in terms of the law of big numbers, as they say, it's still going to be a very big number. It's still going to call forward all of that supply. So we don't have any doubt about that. I mean, but there are conflicts in terms of the terminology. The Treasurer talks about mining boom Mark 1, mining boom Mark 2, and so on. I've really got no idea what he's talking about. I think it's sort of investment stuff. But when you look at when you look at the chart going all the way back to our the days, the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, you'll actually see that you've got this trajectory. To us, it is long-term sustainable growth on a scale never seen before coming at us, and we've got to be ready.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Owen. Yes, sir, please.
Yes, David Brewer from this institution. I'm interested really in your comment that in your mine in Sumatra has gone overpriced double or whatever it is. Now, we're used to that happening in Australia. Why in Sumatra?
Yes, that's right. Twice the price and taken twice as long, or twice the cost and twice as long. Look, I think a combination of a couple of things there. We probably underestimated the time and the tough topography, tough geography, in terms of rainfall and so on. That hurt us probably more than we had allowed. I mean, we go into very considerable detail between ourselves and Ausenco and various other Australian firms, GHDs and various others, how long it's going to take, how many rain days it's going to be, how many bank cubic metres you won't be able to move tomorrow because you've got 2.5 inches of rainfall overnight. We underestimated that substantially. We'll never ever do it again, I can assure you. So there was a bit of almost lack of experience there, you might say.
So it wasn't labour?
It was, part of it was labour, not so much the availability of labour, but we had, for example, it was an issue. It wasn't labour from Indonesia, but it was the technical specialists, the engineering specialists and so on. We had Leighton working for us as the main contractor up there. But I'll give you an example. There was reworks of drawings because the drawings were being done by people that had only been out of university for 2 or 3 years, had to be reworked, has to come back to Brisbane, transferred and so on. By the time you get the drawings right and signed off, it's taken you 2 weeks instead of 1 week. You know, that's an example of shortage of skilled people here that's impacted on. So adding up all of those things, took us twice as long, cost us twice as much.
I thought we were in diggers and dealers for a while actually while you were talking. But
yes, I've actually been, most of the things that I've been lucky enough to be involved with a lot of projects in Rio Tinto and a lot of projects in Oxiana and now in other things. Most of them, the track record's not too bad. You know, you can't get 100% right. I've had worse than Sumatra here in Australia. That was when we redeveloped an old copper smelter and refinery. Cost us 3 times as much and 3 times as long. Again, we made a serious mistake in underestimating how long all of those things would take. So I've had worse, but it's been a tough one. But it certainly won't happen again. Now, contrast that with the Fortescue. It's just sensational work that they've done in terms of, they're up against it over there in the Pilbara, in terms of BHP, Rio Tinto, all expanding, all competing day by day for people. You know, the busiest place in the whole of Western Australia is that airport. 5:30 at Perth Airport out there, the people flying in, flying out, and the headhunters are out there waiting for the plane to come in. So they can take them, hire them to go from one mine to the other. It's extraordinary.
It's Fluoro Central, isn't it? Fluoro to Perth Airport at 5:30 in the morning. Yes, sir, you're at the back, please. Thank you.
Sorry, my question is more about, I suppose...
Could I just trouble you for your name, would you?
Anthony from Bridgeworld International,
Thank you.
Property Advisor. My question is probably more under the category of country software, if you term it that way. You tend to deal with a broad cross-section of different Asian cultures, and through my experience, it's understanding cultures and assimilating them which is a great driver of success. I just wanted to know what your company does and what techniques it adopts to actually assimilate with the cultures, to get the best out of it, understand it, or is it simply just employing locals to do that? I'm interested to know.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you for that. As I say, one of our guiding principles is everlasting commitment to communities. And again, usual story, easy to say these things and difficult to do. But what you do is, you put a lot of work into it, you put a lot of brain work into it to begin with. You put a lot of time into it with people on the ground, and I can tell you lots of stories about how we did that in Laos and just worked with the local people there in those particular cultures, because you're changing their lives forever in a way that it's just huge, and we actually don't, whilst again we can get a picture of before and after, but we'll never be able to understand the massive change that you're making to people's lives there, whether it be in North Sumatra, where it's relatively sophisticated, highway, port, not too far off the grid system, kids go to school up to secondary level type of thing, elementary skills. You're changing their lives forever with the job opportunities, the business opportunities, apart from the physical incursion into their valley, all the way through to the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which was devastated, desolate area, through to people who've got no idea who you are and what you're doing, and pictures don't do it. It's really just a question, working with them. Okay, that's okay, no worries. But you need to, you go all the way back to the anthropos and the sociologists and so on. The best place to find them is right here in Australia, James Cook University, Canberra, ANU. You'll find those people who understand it. We went to Kyrgyzstan, and we took people from the ANU with us there. We were going to work not only with the local the country regime, but working with the the communities and so on there. So a lot of that expertise available here in Australia. Okay, so then in terms of and setting up your programs, your corporate social CSR, corporate social responsibility programs, you first of all discover what you think people need, what they think they need. You set up your committees, you set up those interaction groups and so on, and you work on the programs. And the programs are education, training, development. You've got your own work in terms of the company side, of course, but this is extracurricular. You work on health programs all the way through to water's probably the biggest issue for these people. Then various other health programs all the way through to eradicating malaria and some of the other just terrible, heart-breaking diseases and things that you actually see in those areas. So helping people through that, and infrastructure, roads, bridges. And various other programs in terms of microfinance for businesses and so on, and you need to bring other people in to do that. You don't have that expertise, you're not carrying that expertise in-house. And it's not as if it takes much money, it's not a big expense type of thing. It's really the commitment to get out there and do it. So it's something that we're absolutely passionate about. There's no simple success formula. The first thing is understand the the need that you have to do those sort of things, and then work away at it.
A sea of raised hands. That's good. Yes, sir. You're at the back, please.
Barry Fox is my name. I'm at the Institute. I just want to ask you 2 questions. First of all, your infection for the mining industry is just very great. I think it sort of carries over. And I remember when I was a small boy, I was very keen on gold mining, and my father bought me a mortar and pestle, number of mining short miners' picks. I've still got them. Do you think I should get a hand in one and start going? I feel minded to. But you can take your time in answering that. The other question that's curious is this. What about the environmental effects of all these mining operations? Now, one of those slides you showed a huge area of what I presume before the mine was put in was natural forest. And that goes with mining, as you know from long experience. What do you do about that? Remedying the effects of...
Yes. Okay. Well, look, just on the mortar and pestle and the gold mining, still a lot of gold here in Victoria. So never give up when it comes to gold. And the reason that, in a way, that Melbourne grew so fast and to be such a wonderful city with wonderful people is because of mining. Okay, so on the environmental side, in the particularly, for example, up in Laos and in North Sumatra and some of the other mines, Lawrence, that I've actually been associated with building, no heat, no pressure, no temperature, nothing too much escaping to atmosphere, so you don't have a lot of collection of that. Your main impact on the environment in these places is the impact on water and the drainage systems and basically and vegetation. So really you're protecting all of that, and it starts. Well, you don't need a lecture from me about environmental impact assessment and so on, and you go through and you have your own standards. You do it's basically a complete engineering study. It's highly technical. And then you compare, you then get your permitting, and it doesn't matter whether you're in Australia or Indonesia, by the way, the standards are the same. They simply base them off, international, World Bank standards, IFC standards. There's a banking, the Equator Principles, I think it's called. So you add all those up and make sure you comply with all of that. But it's heavily technical, heavily biased on the engineering side, and heavily involved with protecting water systems, drainage systems, ensuring that everything gets recirculated and nothing leaves that site. There's nothing leaves that site in Sumatra. Not a thing unless it's drinking water quality, and that's checked and rechecked and so on. So we've got a massive, the biggest plant on the site is our water, what we call water polishing plant. So it's a freshwater system. So you just, again, the usual story, just got to have to put a lot of work into it, work to international standards, and never compromise. One mistake, of course, and you're in trouble.
That's good to see after all those years that at least some gold is leading the side.
Yes.
Next question, Frank at the front. Thank you.
Really two questions. Frank Malek from the Institute. A lot of the countries you are mentioning are notably corrupt. How do you deal with it? And the other question ties to that. Recently, I read a background on the state of Botswana, where the government there, in fact, took control of the diamond mines, and as a result of doing that, distributed through the population. And Botswana is probably one of the most outstanding African states because of the governance that is there. So how do your companies relate to those issues?
Well, look, again, I think we never ever compromise when it comes to those issues of, as you say, bribery, graft, and corruption. So we have our own standards. I mean, you can read them in the annual report and on our website. You know, we don't do this. We don't do this. We've never really had an issue. Again, I've been doing this stuff in this part of the world for 30 years. And you know, we know the various levels of corruption at the various levels of wherever they are. You know, you see it all the time. You become familiar with it from the bottle of scotch, which we all practice, almost, through to the facilitation payments. They're somehow or other so-called, politely called, through to the the brown envelopes and the very large payments type of thing. But first of all, recognise it, and secondly, never work with it and never accept it. But what you have to do is, if the prize is worth it, you have to persist in the appropriate channels. And the best defence, or the best offence, I suppose, in terms of fighting that, is working so closely with the local communities in which where your mine and processing facility and so on is going to be. Because once you've got their confidence, once you've got their respect, once you've got their understanding, then it becomes, then you can take that to the provincial governor or the Regency Bupati, and then to the national government and so on. So this is not just Oxiana or G Resources or Tigers Real Minerals or Fortescue or BHP or Rio Tinto or John Laser coming into your valley. This is something that is wanted and needed and desired and committed to by everybody involved here. So there's your sort of social licence and contract, and that's the best way I know, or one of the best ways I know, of dealing with that and sort of knocking it out, if you like. Now go to Botswana, and Tony Manini, who's here, will know more about Botswana than me, but Botswana is actually a very good example of all of the African nations, it's a place. There's some places that you wouldn't go to for reasons that you mention, and various others, but Botswana has a very successful mining history, sort of government rules and regulations, and very good foreign investment track record.
Yes, thank you.
My old friend Ian Kerr.
Just tell me if you're name, please.
Martin Jones, the Institute. I came on because I'm interested and also as an investor. And my old friend Ian Kerr said I would be in for a treat tonight, which I have been. I have 5 short questions. You mentioned gold. You haven't mentioned silver or platinum.
Yes.
There must be a reason. Secondly, in terms of the belt going round,
Yes.
Geographically, you missed out Alaska, the home of the Tea Party. Is there a reason? Number 3, I've thought for 20 years all the discoveries have been what we see above ground. And when was Falcon invented? 30 years ago, 40 years ago?
Yes.
Something like that.
Yes.
The last one is language. Now, you mentioned Indonesia, the biggest Muslim country, which is to our north. I heard the other month that Melbourne University has stopped teaching Indonesian. When I came here in 1971, secondary school, the language was Indonesian. The 80s, it was Japanese. The 90s, it was Mandarin. What is it now? Arabic?
Okay. Silver. We love silver too. Not as much as gold, but we love silver. We also love platinum, not as much. But platinum's a bit harder to sort of find and mine and so on. Silver tends to come with gold, so if you're looking for copper, you'll get some silver with it. If you're looking for gold, you'll get some silver with it. And silver, is an industrial metal as well as a precious metal. So we want as much of that as we can possibly get. We've got 100 million ounces in resources up there at Matabe, and we'd like to have more. So that was that question. In terms of the where do we go then with the language? Alaska, yes. What's the girl's name? See Russia. That's why she's in international. That's why she's going to be good at. Yeah. Anyway, Alaska's there. There's an amazing discovery in Alaska called Pebble, which was discovered by the Hunter Dickinson geologists, which is now owned by Mitsubishi and Rio Tinto, I think, Tony. Pebble. So that's in that chain. It's suffering a bit because of environmental permitting and so on. It'll get there. I mean, all of these countries will be mining friendly. All of the legislatures will ultimately give you the permits because the world needs those ore bodies and the minerals.
I think you mentioned Polaris as well.
There's a final one on language.
Language.
Is that important? For example, Laos, Cambodia,
yes.
French. I'm trying to keep up.
Or Russian, in some cases.
Yeah, or Russian. Yeah. Important at all?
Or
is English the world language now?
Well, look,
despite what the French say.
Yeah. It's always terribly important. Again, we've got a whole suite of people working for us over a period of time, and we do have those skills. But in terms of encouraging, when we talk to Martin Ferguson and DFAT and various other people in terms of our educational requirements or what we would be interested in seeing. Language isn't in the top 5 type of thing because it tends to come anyway, and you'll always find those specialists, and you're able to use your people in the national countries anyway. So I don't know whether it's
as important as language is culture. I think
English is probably the lingua franca to quantify. Yes, Eve. Yes, thank you. Just give us your name.
Eve Marlett, member of the Institute. Apart from Norway and perhaps Botswana, what countries have done it well in husbanding the benefits of mining for the long-term benefit of the citizens of the country?
Yes. Well, look, I'm not an expert in all of this. That's the first thing I should say. Australia, has actually done it well, really. When you look back and go through the various developments and so on. I mean, there's some pretty terrible stories, yes, but generally speaking, it's been very successful in enhancing the livelihoods, living standards, and effectively general well-being of Australians. And I have to say the work that we are doing in Asia, generally speaking, from a community and environmental and economic and commercial perspective, is enhancing the livelihoods of those people. So the work that we're doing in that part of the world is going well. Tony, any particular examples that you can think of?
Chile, sir.
Chile, yeah. Chile, a very good example. Peru, much more of the same, a little bit perhaps less than Chile, but Chile's at the top of the table. One of the charts that I didn't show was of sort of country attractiveness from a sovereign risk perspective, probably more than anything else. Chile's the top of the Chile, Canada, Australia, always at the top of the tree there. So Look, I mean, you do hear some pretty terrible stories, and there's various names for it. What's it called? The Dutch disease and various other things that you hear about, where resources tend to, you know, a great wealth in resources tends to breed corruption, and the diversion of the surplus that's created to the wrong places. And of course, once that happens, it all stops. You know, it comes to a sort of a grinding halt. But generally speaking, I think you are finding, particularly in our part of the world, this Asia Pacific zone, you are finding that more and more governments, more and more civil society actually understands the benefits that mining and processing of the minerals can, and you know, rehabilitation of any disturbance brings to the communities.